All right, so what we got for today? I'm missing Adam Erickson. Oh, I'm sorry. Hi, Adam. How you doing?
I'm good.
I'm Eric. Nice to meet you. Okay, good. Cool. All right, so I want to pick up where we left off last week, talking about logging. But now we're going to look at one of the more popular logging frameworks that's out there because, one, it's nice to be familiar with some of these, and two, along the way, we're going to use a couple things in Visual Studio that will open up the door to some more learning. So, if you recall from last week, I made the mother of all console applications, which is my division application. I can enter in that we're going to take 12 and we're going to divide it by 6, and whoa, we get 2, right? And again, this is copyrighted, so don't go stealing this, okay? But we had looked at a logging mechanism where we would hard code in where we're going to save things, right? Now we're going to look at a little bit of a different methodology. There's a thing called log4net. I even named my project using log4net. Now, log4net is a framework, so it's going to include a little bit of documentation and some code. We need to use it in the whole .NET arena when you're going to use some pre-made code, or you're going to use anything that isn't part of your project initially. You need to reference the fact that you're using it. And if you look over here at your Visual Studio, your integrated development environment, you'll have references. Now, there's already some that come out of the box. Lo and behold, we have to reference system because that's the basic library for anything inside .NET. That's where everything that Microsoft made that you get out of the box starts. And all these other things are pretty straightforward. You might as well reference C# because that's the language we're going to use. But this is also where you put various third-party libraries. Somebody else besides Microsoft, a third party, made log4net. And there's, I don't know, about 1 million or 2 million different third-party libraries out there, right? To do that, you need to install it. Now, installing third-party libraries is a real interesting thing. Let's say you're a guy who wants to make a third-party library, and you make it for a certain version of Microsoft's .NET. And a year and a half goes by, and you've got some upgrades to it you want to do, and Microsoft came out with a new version of .NET, and so you needed to change it a little bit. Well, you can put out an update, but what's to keep people from using the old version of what you've got? So what you've created, if you're a software developer and you're using somebody's third-party library, you've created a dependency on that library. You're now dependent upon it. Your application, if it uses that code library at all, can't work right without having that thing work. You have a dependency. And so managing dependencies for your software development projects is really, really an important area. When you're using what comes out of the box with Python or what comes out of the box with Microsoft's .NET framework, you don't have to worry about managing dependencies. That's all taken care of for you by the people that created Python or maintain Python, people that created and maintain .NET. A third-party library is not that way. The point is that managing that requires some special tools. One of the tools is now built into Microsoft Visual Studio, and it is called, where are you, tools? NuGet. It's not candy, okay? NuGet is a package manager. A package is a pre-made piece of code, a pre-made library. So, if you go down here to manage the NuGet packages you have for your solution, the solution, of course, is all of your code, all the projects in it, you can actually search online and find a lot of different things you can add to your project, add to your code. You can also, you get some stuff that gets installed on your hard drive when you install a .NET that you can choose from. We're looking for something called log4net that's available online. So if you go right here and just type in log4net, you'll just start searching. And look at that, log4net version 1.2.13. It comes from Apache. I referred to that right at the end of last week's talk. Apache is an open source consortium. It's a consortium, sounds all dangerous. It's just people that got together and decided to become involved in this totally not paid project to maintain things. And so Apache maintains log4net. And if you look down here, It's a tool to help the programmer output log statements to a variety of output targets. I kind of just gave this a brush off last week, but what that really means is you can point where you want your log information to go, and it can be a variety of things. And then just read this. In case of problems with an application, it's helpful to enable logging so a problem can be located. With Log4net, it's possible to enable logging at runtime. Who here does not know what runtime means? Good, awesome. How about an application binary? Everybody knows what that is. That's fine, Adam. Okay, good. Totally fine. Okay, so remember that binary is what the computer actually uses, right? So when we're making code that looks like that, well, that's a big window right there, right? When we're making code that looks like this, which happens to be C# code, the computer doesn't understand C# code. This all has to get broken down to ones and zeros, broken down to binary, right? When you compile your code, that's what you're doing, is you're turning all this almost English language stuff into ones and zeros. The resulting file is called a binary file, and it's the thing that the computer can actually execute. Of course, if you look at it, you literally see ones and zeros. You wouldn't see public, integer, do division and log it, integer, quotient. You wouldn't see that. You see ones and zeros. So to go back to what we're talking about here, using Log4net, so if you talk about modifying the application binary, that means modifying what has gone from this sort of content, written in C# or some other language, down into ones and zeros. You can't do that while your program's running. It's not going to work, right? So this takes on a little more meaning. With Log4net, it's possible to enable logging at runtime without modifying the application binary. So you can decide whether or not you're going to have logging. And you don't have to program it into your program one way and never be able to change it. It can happen in response to user input or to an administrator logging into the back end of your software and changing it. It's still user input. Okay, so there's a package here. And the package is an assemblage of software, right? And it's designed so that log statements can remain in shipped code without incurring a high performance cost. Shipped code is what we're talking about. You made your binaries and you either put them on a CD-ROM and sent them to a customer, or you made them available for download over the internet. Regardless, you as a software development team finished the product and compiled it all down to ones and zeros into a binary and gave it to customers, right? Okay, speed of logging is crucial. All right, a lot more to eat. At the same time, log output can be so voluminous that it becomes quickly overwhelming. One of the distinctive features of Log4net is the notion of hierarchical loggers. Using these loggers, it is possible to selectively control which log statements are output at arbitrary granularity. Let me show you how that works. Log4net, open source library, allows .NET applications to log output to a variety of sources, download it, blah, blah, blah. Look at these levels of logging. You can see that they increase in level of severity just by their names. Debug, information, warnings, error, and fatal. Okay? Hopefully the amount of logging performed by each level will decrease going down this list. We want more debug information than fatal errors. What increases as you go down this list, typically, is how much data is saved in your log file. Now, this is something you could program all yourself, but then you'd have to do it for every single program that you were building. Why do it when somebody's already solved this, is the thing. That's why to use a framework. So, what we want to do is add Log4net. Well, we found it, and we can literally just go install. It confirms that in this solution that I called using Log4net, and the project called using, the C# project called using Log4net, that I want to install the actual Log4net package. So that message was up real quick, because it's a small package. We close this. Now, notice here in my references, I have a new reference, Log4net. And if we wanted to, I don't know if this will work or not. Yeah. A little bit of data here. Come on. Notice that in my file system, it's saved thing called a DLL. Who here knows what a DLL is? Good. Give me a rough layman's description of a DLL.
Well, the dynamic link library, it's what links elements inside a program.
Good. Okay, excellent. All right, so this is a legacy of the way programming for Windows machines was done about 10 to 12 years ago. In essence, a dynamic link library is binary code that you get to use. It's an executable piece of code. You don't get to see inside it without very special tools, but it makes available to you really cool functions. Those functions, because you can't see inside it, need to be documented somewhere so you know how to call those functions, how to use them. But that's all a DLL is it's a small program. That's a DLL. So it installed this DLL, which contains everything we need for log4net, in this extremely deep nested location. Now though, my program can use it. So let's use it. Okay, so let's go back over here. And a nice little tutorial here. We referenced log4net, so our program can now use this, this pre-made library. Now, how you reference third-party libraries is different from system to system, from programming language to programming language. Java will do it a different way. You know, Python will do it a different way. But the concept is the same, is I want to use some code somebody else made. Thank you very much. How do I do it? So now, in .NET, there's a thing called an assembly. An assembly is the collection of all the resources your program is going to need that get turned down into ones and zeros, because you need more than just this code right here. You also need any included libraries, because you can't just, if we're going to reference log4net somewhere in our code, then we need to include in what gets turned down into ones and zeros all the log4net data. Wouldn't that make sense? Otherwise we go to call it inside our program, and in that executable we didn't include anything for it to look at. So you say, please use the following function that's in log4net, and the computer can't do anything because it doesn't have the log4net data. So there's a place in here called an assembly info file where you can see that there are a number of things that have already come out of the box for us that Microsoft gives us. We're going to add something to it. So let's go to the top here. These using statements, for those of you who haven't done C# yet, these are just saying I'm using the following pre-made code. This is just pre-made code libraries. Okay? And then in here is a bunch of information about your whole package that's going to become your final program. We go down inside here, and there's lots of stuff you don't even need to know about. You can put, this is where you put version numbers, for example, because every time you get this complete package together that includes all the code you wrote, all of your third-party libraries, and anything else that's needed, as soon as you put that together and want to make a finished product out of it, a version, you better mark what the version is in here. So we need to add something to here that says, hey, when you're getting ready to take everything I've written, I need you to also include this log4net third-party library, because if you don't, my code's going to break, thank you very much. So the way you do that is literally by going into that file and adding in another thing to be included in the assembly, the collection. And this is what you put in there. Now again, this is something that's documented somewhere. You don't have to memorize this. You don't have to know it automatically. The people that made log4net know how to make this work. So you can just go, oh, it's magic. I put this in, and now log4net's going to be included. So you would literally do this. Copy. And go over, and you want to open up. This is using log4net. Okay, good. Open up your assemblyinfo.cs. And you can see that there's a number of these already here. I'm just going to hit enter and put that one. Notice I didn't break anything. I've got no little squiggly red underlines. It all seems to work fine, which typically tells me, hey, I copied and pasted correctly. Good. I know how to use that. So now, when my program gets created into an executable that I can give to someone else, because I'm going to sell 1 million of these, watch me, then it'll include the log4net code. Now, there's also what's called a config file. Who here has heard of a config file? Okay, so a config file is where you put things that are not the code that you want run, but they are valuable data nonetheless. Things like which version of the .NET framework will be included, for example. This is also where you put information about which version of a third-party library is this program built to use. I could, if I wanted to, get an older version of Log4Net that came out 2 years ago, because it's been around for quite a while, and I could grab that from the internet and include it here, and I need to reference that in my configuration file. So my configuration file tells my program which version to expect of the library. And that way, if something goes wrong and the wrong version of that Log4Net gets installed, I know it. Because I need to know. I'm writing my program against a certain version of that third-party library as it stood when it was created, and I need to make sure that they stay in sync. So you need to put something in the configuration file that says, hey, I'm using Log4Net. And I do not want my Evernote web clipper. Thank you, though. That's great. So there's two things that are happening here. For those of you who have not spent time inside a configuration file, they're typically written in XML, Extensible Markup Language. And the way XML works, you have expandable and collapsible nodes. This configuration is a node. It starts here and it ends here. And in fact, it's the main node in the entire config file, because it's the configuration node. Notice inside it, nested one level down, we have a startup node, which starts here and ends up here. You could, for readability's sake, collapse that. Notice how it tells you, hey, there's a node here, you're not seeing all of it. That's just a nice feature of Visual Studio. So now if we go back to what this says, it says that inside configuration, notice configuration is right there, go all the way down, there's the end of configuration. We need to somehow include these other nested or lower level in the hierarchy sections, or nodes, I'm sorry. A node called config sections, and a node called Log4Net. And there's the end of Log4Net. You see those things? So let's look at our config file as it stands already, because I think we already have a config sections. We don't. Look at that. So we need config sections. Now, where's Adam? That's fine, I can figure this out. All right. So what I learned the other day was that the config section has to go right at the top. If you put it anywhere farther down, then you run into errors. So we can literally grab this, and we're going to declare that there's a part of this configuration file that's called config sections. Copy it. Hey, welcome to Apple and Windows on Apple. So now I have a node inside my configuration file called config sections, and you can see that it behaves the same way. I can collapse it, I can expand it. There's only one section defined in here, and that section is going to be called Log4Net. So the way .NET works is it's going to say, oh, I'm looking at the configuration file, I found a thing that says configuration sections. It's telling me that there better be a section in here called Log4Net where I'm going to find a lot of really, really valuable data. Where is it? Oh, that's right, we haven't built it. It's right here. So now we can grab this and put in the section that we just called for right here. Now you've got a beginning and an end. Oh, this should be over 1 just for readability's sake. There. And then we have a beginning and an end. So right here is where we can put our section. So let's take a look at this for a second. And up here, to review, we're saying, oh no, I didn't do that wrong. There we go. We're saying we're gonna have a config section called log4net. Okay, good, I'll look for it. Oh look, there it is. Inside here, we can configure a lot of things. Probably the one that stands out the most to you is this. Ding, 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 ding. We can change in here where we want our files to be saved. We no longer have to, as I did last week, put it somewhere inside my code. I can actually just put it right inside this configuration file. Now, here's a really cool thing. You ready? Configuration files don't get converted to ones and zeros. They are adjustable while your program is running. So the way it works is this, dry erase board? Am I just gonna have to tear it off the wall again? Alright, that's fine. Okay. Check this out. Alright, I'm helping these guys out here too because there's people watching streaming. Would you? That'd be great. Alright, we're gonna have to get a whole different setup for this. Okay, so I talked last week about the idea that you would have a computer that was a web server. You could also have one called an application server. So on this application server, which is what would be my phenomenal division program would be on, you would have a place where individuals could come in and request this do division program. And because what this do division program has been compiled into a binary, this awesome server program can create a version of the do division program just for this guy and serve it to him. And then someone else comes along and she wants to do division program because it's fantastic. And this becomes another version or instance of that do division program running. Now each of these you can't break into and see the code. It's been compiled down to binaries. However, each of them can look to a text file, actually an XML file, which is the config. It's the thing you and I were just looking at. That's not been compiled down. That's available. It's on this app server. So you could literally, if you want to change the location of your logging file, log into this server. Here you are, you're Mr. Admin. You can log in and change the location of your log file to whatever you want. That's part of what makes configuration files so awesome, is you can change them at runtime. You don't have to get your program to a software developer, have him make some adjustments, recompile it down to a binary, have him put it back down here, and then start over. Cool. You just sit over there for a second. Awesome. So hopefully that gives a little more insight into why we care about these config files. They can be changed after a program's already been turned into an executable. Okay, good. So, how am I doing? Did I kill it? Oh yeah. Thank you, dude. Okay.
Just winded.
Alright, it'll live. Alright, so we can change in our config file where we want our log files to go. And I can do this, I can do, and then Erik log file.txt. So that means that here's my C drive, here's, did I say test or temp? I think I wrote test, didn't I? Yeah, that's wrong. Right, so C drive in temp, it'll create an Erik log file.txt whenever I have logs that go in, right? Good. Now, also in here, in this config file, you can see it's defined the types of logging that it'll do. Let's say you do not want your logging to ever include anything below warnings. Let's say we don't ever want to let's say you don't want to log any debug or any information. You just want warnings and above to be logged. You can configure that. And you can change it while your program is running. How cool is that? Okay? So there's some things you can do with the configuration of this log4net third-party library. And you change those things inside the config file. Everybody following so far? All right, good. Now one thing, who caught that there's a potential problem inside this file? What version of log4net am I specifying be used?
1.2?
1.2.10, right? What did I install? If I right-click on this and go to Properties, I installed 1.2.13. Now, how did that happen? That happened because I took this off of a silly little tutorial that was written, I don't know, I don't even have the date on this thing. I don't know, this could have been out here for 2 years. I don't know. And so it's specifying a version of log4net that was current at the time he wrote it. So I need to change this to match what I actually installed. I actually installed 1.2.13.0. There we go. Okay. There's a lot of stuff in here you're not going to know about. Totally got it. That you can figure that out. Boom. I have a mismatch in my version of the library. The other stuff in here that you can configure would be something an experienced developer would be doing. Okay, good. So now we have, to review, I'm going to kill properties so we have more real estate here. We've referenced the whole log4net library. We've made sure that when we build our binaries that we include our log4net data. And we've gone to our config file to make sure that while our program is running, when it needs data about log4net, that it can find it, because we have told our config file we'll have a section for log4net and what version of log4net we're using, and we've included that section, and we've modified our specific configuration data in there so that at least we save the log files where we want to. Everybody following so far? Okay, good, cool. All right. Now we can get to actually writing code and making logs happen. Okay. Right there is the example of how to call the code for it. Let me go through this for a second. Log4net is the library that we just installed. Now, again, remember you can't look inside it. It's a DLL. It's already been compiled down to ones and zeros, right? But inside there is a section of the code called config, and it has a subsection called basic configurator, and it has in there a method, a thing you can do called configure. We're going to call that. Now what that does is it goes to the config file and just uses it, the data in the config file, to set a couple things up, to configure your log4net. Once you've done that, your log4net, whenever you call it, it'll know where to save the files. It'll know how to filter out logging if you want to apply any filtering, okay? But that's not going to happen without you telling log4net, this third-party library that you installed, to do so. So you, in fact, tell it to. Hey, log4net, go find this specific, it's called a method, and run it. And as soon as it's done that, now you know you can properly use log4net. And now you're actually going to create something you get to use. The object that you get to create, we're going to call it log. That's the name of it right here. And it's something that gets made by using the log4net library, a whole section in it called log manager, and a method called getLogger. Please give me an actual instance of a logger. And the logger will be configured according to what got done right up here. So it knows where to save things. It knows what filtering to apply. these 2 lines of code would be 100 or 300 or whatever if you needed to write them yourself. They all got written, and they're all inside here, and you never even need to see them. They just work, okay? Then, what this guy does in his tutorial is he just forces logging according to a certain filter. We're not going to do that. We're actually going to make a problem. See, we're going to make something fail and log it. Good, so let's at least do these first 2 things right here. Let's get log4net to use our app.config section to configure how it's going to work, and then let's make an actual logger. So if we go back to our program, boom. So notice no red line. Oh, I got a red line. Check it out. The type or namespace ilog could not be found. Are you missing a using directive? Oh, look. The using directive. Watch. Using log4net. I didn't tell this specific section of the program I'm using to actually use this loaded library. Now, why would .NET want you to do that? Well, why include a bunch of extra code to go along with what I'm writing here if you're not going to use it? Just makes your program bigger. Now notice that error message went away. So here we are, and we have this log4net section of code, and inside there is another section called config, and there's a class in there that's called basic configurator, and that class has a method called configure. Initializes the log4net system with a default configuration, and it gets that default configuration from right here, right? Good. Now I need to make a logger. Let's stop right here. Let's run this bad boy. I'm about to do that. Oh, remember, this is fun, isn't it? Hello. So now we have a logger. The logger happens to be called log. I could call it Fred. I could call it George. I could call it master logger, or whatever I want to do. I could call it Lager because it's a pun and I like beer. But it's called log, and this is an actual instance, a working version of a logger from log4net. And inside it, notice that all of these are enabled. Why? Because my filter said let's use all different hierarchies. If we had converted in the app.config to not use all of them, some of these would be false. Make sense? So now I got a logger I can use. Well, I'm not using it though. I haven't logged anything. Let's do this. How about when we get our result, this is where we get our result of division, right? The result is going to be called output number. I want to log that. Literally log dot info. I'm just logging some information. And I'm going to say the result of the division operation was, and then I'm going to add in my output number. That's all. That's all I have to do to use logging now. And it's going to log it. Let's run it. All right, 5 divided by 2. Oh, I changed my code. So I got a result, which is 2. Okay? All right. Now let's see. Did it log it? There you go. It logged it. It gives the date, the time, says the error level, the logging level was info for information. This is the program that it came from, and this is the message. The result of the division operation was 2. So I got all of that with one line of code right there. Make sense? Good. So now what I want to figure out is why did it actually put that in the console? That was weird, wasn't it? The result of the division operation was, your division result is 2. Good, we get to debug something. All right, so let's go from where we do the actual math, and let's step through this and see what's wrong. So I'm going to put a breakpoint right here. Right here is where I've had the user give me the quotient and the divisor, and I've created an instance of a class called myDivisionMachine. MyDivisionMachine is right over here. Where's my MyDivisionMachine? Oh, maybe that's a problem. Oh, I made one. Sorry, I'm making a version of the doDivision class, okay? And I happen to call it myDivisionMachine. So here is where I'm going to use that instantiated or created doDivision class and run the doDivision and logit method. Where's the doDivision and logit method? It is right here, doDivision and logit. I give it a quotient, I give it a divisor, it does all this super awesome math, and it returns whatever you got back. Okay? Oh, and here's some logging that we're going to change in a moment too. Now let's okay, so let's just run it and stop right there. 7, 3. All right, so it's stopped. So we have our 7, we have our 3. We're about to give them to the doDivision and logit. Okay, let's step into it. Go over to the doDivision and logit. Now notice we're over here. We're inside this method, doDivision and logit. We passed it our 7, we passed it our 3, and I really wish it was a... There we go. All right, so we've done the most important thing, which is Erik's magic here, where we figured out the result is 2. Okay, this was from last week when we were working. This is creating a log entry and then manually writing it. We could rewrite this in a moment if we want to. For now, let's figure out what went wrong. So it just wrote that, and it's going to return our result of 2. Okay, back to whatever called it. Boom. So here we are, and then it returned 2. Good. So output number is now equal to 2. This is log.info. Now this should only be going to where we configured in the config file, which is the Erik log file.txt. So let's see what happens.
Maybe it has a silent method.
Let's look. Look at that. You know, I didn't spot when it actually put that on the screen. But we just made that. Look at that verbiage. The result of the division operation was 2. We just made that right here. It had to happen. Why is log.info actually writing to the console?
Can you turn it off in one of the methods?
Turn which off?
Of the log info. Maybe it has a silent method. It only writes onto a file.
Well, let's look. In our config, it's appending. We're writing it to log file. It does append to the file. Layout type is laid out here. So here's a pattern for how it's going to lay out the data. We saw this pattern. It's a date, the logging level, who it is logging it, what the message is. We saw that right. See that format? Date, logging level, what it is that's logging it, and what the message is. So that's obviously working correctly. Good. And yet it's also right into the console. Good. Well, what do you do when stuff like this happens? You use lay internet. Log for net info logging message to console C#. Look at that. It says, is there a way to do this? To configure log for net to print logs both the console and to files during debug. That's what it's doing. So if this tells us how to do it, maybe we can undo it. Trying to find a way to debug software efficiently. So what did they say? They said both appenders. All right, so append to file. Oh, look. Do we have anything like that going on? No, we have a file appender. We do not have a console appender. Interesting. What's even more interesting is that when I did this last week, getting ready, it didn't log to the console. So we don't have anything in here that says it should do anything but append our data to the file. There's nothing that says it should log it to the actual screen. All right, so that wasn't the answer we needed. Ah, look at that. Debug. I have debug turned off. I have debug turned off in the app.config. So he says, hey, even with it set up the way it's supposed to, it's still putting it to the console. What is supposed to? Apparently it's this. I have debug turned off in the app.config. So he says, even though I turned debug off, it's still going to the console. Stop doing that, please. Good. Let's kill this. All right. Stop. Collaborate and listen. Yeah, I just did that. All right, 6, 3. All right. And then let's just step. Do it one more time. Let's see. Let's look at our message. There's nothing here. Okay. Now let's do this operation. Let's look. Yeah, it did it. All right. Well, there's something to debug that's separate from what I'm trying to teach you, although I am going to figure out what the problem is. Notice that it did, in fact, log, though. If we go to log.info, if we open up our text file, which was open, there it is. They're just logged. The result of the operation was, what did I say? I said 12 divided by 6 or something? 2. Okay, good. Awesome. My answer is always 2. I got to use different math. Okay, so our logging is working. Okay? Why it's right into the console, don't know. I'll figure it out. But that was logging informational nature, or data of an informational nature, right? Now we wanted to log when there's an error. So, you might remember how I did this last week? How I caught my errors. What did I use? Try catch. Anybody remember that? All right. So right up here. All right, so to explain this, who was not here last week? Okay, cool. So when you when you wrap in C#, when you wrap something in try and then catch, and there's similar constructs in lots of other languages, when you wrap something in try and catch, what happens is the computer keeps track of everything that it's trying to do inside this try block, which you can see most of right here. So the try block goes from here down to, come on, farther, right there, okay? It keeps track of everything that's going on in there. And if for some reason an actual error happens in your program, like, and by error I mean something that the computer literally can't handle, right? Then it'll catch that fact and you can do something with it inside the program instead of it stopping the execution of your program. So let's show what happens if you don't have one of these, actually. In fact, let's go. I'm going to take away my try-catch, because I can control Y and put it all back. So I don't have any try-catch. Now let's run this and have Eric be an idiot. Put a 5 divided by the letter F. Whoa! My program stopped. It died. We got a problem. Now, what's the problem? When converting a string to a date time, parse it, I can view the detail. It says input string was not in the correct format. That's probably true. F is not a correct format for a number. Okay? So I just stopped my program from executing. And because I didn't handle it very well, my user has absolutely no idea what's going on. It might just be waiting, or they might hit enter again and nothing's occurring. This is bad programming and I'm an idiot, right? Good. So what do? We catch the fact that a mistake happened. That, not a mistake, we catch the fact that an operation the computer could not complete occurred. A computer can't convert the letter F into a number. So let's put all these back. Oh no, really? My control Y isn't working. I have to type it all over again. Life goes on. So I put the beginning of the try, where the main function I care about is. I put the end of the try when I'm all done there. And after that, if it breaks, I want to catch the error. I'll call the exception that it catches EX. I could call it mistake. I could call it ER for error, but EX is very common, okay? All right, and then here, inside these brackets, this is where I put what to do if that happens. What to do if something so fundamentally unhandleable occurs that the computer normally would want to just stop executing the program. What do? Right? Well, you want to say something to the console. Say, on the console, you want to say, there was an error while trying to do math. Math hurts my head. Error. And then you want to, at the end of that sentence, also put from this exception that came in, what was the main message. Good. And then a semicolon would be nice. So when the computer breaks, because we're going to break it by trying to give it an F again, it'll be caught down here, and all the detail about what went wrong will be put in this object called EX. One of the properties of that object is a message. That message will get appended to what I wrote right here. Good. So then what do I do with it? Now I want to log it. Now I don't have a logger in here yet, right? So I need a logger. How do I make a logger? Well, I've already configured right here. I need to configure this outside of my try-catch. Good. So down inside here, I can now go, hello? Log dot, now this is not info. If we go back here and look at the warning levels, what do we have? Debug, information, warnings, error, and fatal. Fatal means it's going to completely kill the operation of the program. That would be fatal, wouldn't it? Okay, so I'm going to say fatal. Log dot fatal. I'm going to log a fatal message, and I'm going to write error during division. And then same thing, I'm going to put in there the message property from my exception that came in. So I'm going to tell the user what's going on, and I'm also going to log it into the system, right? So let's try this, and we're going to break it, see what happens. 6 divided by the letter G. Oh, it went away too fast because I didn't do a console dot read line. Alright, let's try it again. 7 divided by J. There was an error while trying to do math. Math hurts my head. Error. And from this point forward, it's the data from that exception object. Input string was not in the correct format. And it's still simultaneously writing the errors to the console. That's fine. We're going to find this error right here inside our log file now. Look at that. Fatal error happened using log4net. Error during division. 1, I can't spell the word division. Good. So notice that our logging is getting, notice that every single time a logging thing happens, it gets appended, so you don't use any logs, which tells you, 1, great, I'm not going to lose anything. 2, this could very rapidly become a very, very, very large log, right? Which is something we talked about last week. So, but I just want to point something out here, that beyond the logic of what we're doing, the actual logging is one very simple line. That's it. You say log, what level of severity is the log, and here's your message, and you're done. And it takes care of everything. Now, watch this. If this were a real program, I couldn't get inside the code. Because remember, the code would have been turned into an executable. But let's say I wanted to change where my files were saving. I could log onto the server, like I talked about in that little diagram on the dry erase board, and literally change where I want this to go. I could make a second folder called subfolder, and then call this Erik superlog file. There we go. Okay, good. Awesome. So now when I run this, A divided by 4. Oh, I have a. I don't want any more of those. Okay, good. All right, your division result is 2. Now, notice that if we go back here, if I find my original log file, which is error log file.txt, it didn't append anything there because I went to the config file and changed where it was going to go. But notice it did create a subfolder folder and create an Erik superlog file.txt, and bingo, there's my log information. Now I was able to do all of that without getting into my program, and there's the value of having, one of the many values of having a framework for logging that can maintain data inside a config file. So there we go. Now you can do a lot of things with this, right? We could, for example, go inside, like logging, this is just general thoughts here. When you're doing logging, especially if you're doing like debug logging, it's really good to have every single small unit of work log something. The smallest like thing thing that the computer did, right? That implements a piece of business logic. In here, it's the doing our division. That is the most fundamental thing this program does. So if I were testing this, if I were writing this, I'd want that every single time it did a division, I would log something. Well, oh, look at this. I've been doing this. Let's look at our test log. I'm just curious. C, temp, test log. Oh, that's right. Now notice, all it does is put the most recent one because I didn't configure it to append. You see that? So that's the most recent operation we did, but we've been writing to that every single time. Now, if I want to change that, how would I do it? Oh, yeah, I'm going to stop your program. Somebody tell me what to write here. If I want to log, oh, I'm in the exception, aren't I? Let's do it up here. How would I log this? Somebody be brave. Tell me what to type. What object do I need to use to take advantage of the fact that I have log4net running? I created a logger object. What is it and where is it?
Wasn't that like the console log, console read and write?
That's to input. That's to get output and input from the console
Okay.
itself, which is down. Well, it isn't running, but the black window. No, I need a logger object from log4net. Now, where do I get one of those? I made one in a whole other section of the program. It's that. Remember all this stuff? I configured, and then I made a logger, right? I need a logger over here, where I'm going to do my division. How do I get a logger? I do the same thing I did before. I make sure that I'm, yeah, cut and paste, good. I like that. Make sure I'm using log4net, right? Then I'm going to go down here, and now that I'm able to use log4net, I'm going to go to log4net, and I've got that configuration namespace, and in there was a basic configurator, and in that was a configure method. Well, it might help if I actually did the... Oh, no, I already configured. Mistake. I configured when we first hit the program. No need to configure again. Everybody follow that? When we started the program, the first thing it does is go to main. The very first thing that I'm having it do is go use my app.config to do any configuration things. I don't ever need to do that again. Okay? So over here, I can simply just make a logger, just like I do right here. So we're gonna make, it's a, good, I'm fine, ilog, and what we call this, we're gonna call this error tracker. I like that name. And we're going to use log4net. And this is a log manager. This class is used by client applications to request logger instances. I need a logger instance. So I'm going to get a logger. And I'm going to call it, I can name it whatever I want to. Unit of work logger. Good. All right, good. So I made a logger. It's called error tracker. Now, when I want to keep track of stuff here, what would I do? Any ideas? I grab that error tracker object. It comes with a bunch of things it can do. It can log a fatal error. It can log an info log. I want an info log. What do I want it to say? I want it to say, I did division. I divided. Oh. Actually, I already created up here. I created a nice little log entry. I did division. And then I'm gonna grab my log entry that I already made. Good. So I've created this a log4net object called a logger called error tracker. I'm gonna make an informational log, and it's gonna be equal to this. Let's run that bad boy. 7 through 2. Now I'm doing 2 loggings. Right? Why am I doing 2 loggings? Because one of them is done in the main program right here. Which is after we've done the work. Notice it came last. The first one came from inside the actual unit of work. Well, now I don't need that second one, do I? If I'm already logging what happens inside this do division and log it, I certainly don't need to log once I get back what happened. So I can kill this. But if I look at my log file, which is now in subfolder, Erik's super log file, it gave me both of them. Notice that they were microseconds apart. 3:05 and 52 seconds, and this is how many milliseconds apart they were. I did the division, the result of the division operation was blah, 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 blah. Okay? All right, so. At this point, I could clean up, remove that logging, don't need it. And I could even go in here into my do division. I'm logging the normal unit of work. I could log errors that occur right down inside here. Literally by going, what do I call it? Error tracker. Dot. This is a fatal error. I killed the program. And then error entry. What happened? Oh, it's a small space. There you go. So now I've taken my logging and I've made it happen at the smallest possible unit of work there is. My division operation or the failure of my division operation. Now, you're going to want to have strategy from a company point of view about whether or not you log that in production, because it could happen, 5,000 times a minute or whatever. Who knows what this is being used for, and you don't want it to build up. But that's for you and the company to decide. All right, so we're almost done. Just a big picture things to take away from this are, regardless of the fact that we're talking about logging, just when using a third-party library, you need to be able to find a way to include it inside your code, and make sure that you keep track of what version of it you're using, right? Because you've now created a dependency. You're dependent upon that library and making sure that it doesn't break anything for you. When you use a third-party library, you need to have documentation for it, because you can't just peruse through the code like you peruse through your own code to figure out how to use it. So you'll need to have either documentation from the people that make it themselves, or from books or wherever, right? Most of the time, frankly, I find that you get better writing from people that have used it than you do from the people that made it. I don't know why that is, right? Also, when you're using a third-party library, you need to find some way that when you create your final executable, that you include that in what gets done, which is what we did right here. And then the reason for it is because you can do things like this, where literally with one line, you handle all of your logging. Boom, done. Questions? Okay, cool. Awesome. Thank you guys very much.
Thank you.
Yep.
Thanks, sir.
Why is it logging the console? I want to kill that with fire.
You said cool right when I was gonna ask.
Oh yeah, sure. What's up?
If you don't update the version number,
Yeah.
How does it break the code? Like, what are some of the things that can happen?
It doesn't always do it, but it isn't that it'll necessarily break the code if you don't update the version number. What happens is, that's a huge red flag to have mismatches, because it means that it's incredibly likely, it's risky, that there is a code mismatch with the version you're saying you're using and the version you actually have. And so, especially in the .NET universe, there's lots of tools that are out there built into .NET and through other third-party tools that will catch that inconsistency and not let you build.
Okay.
To say, sorry, you have to fix this. And you have to specifically override it and say, ignore the fact that there's a mismatch. It defaults to, you better have them in sync, right? Why? Because when you have these huge, giant, complex projects and we're using 15 different third-party libraries, you can know in your head that the mismatch means nothing, but are you gonna try to keep track of all of that? No. Have a default to, they must match, and if you are 100% positive that it's okay to have a mismatch, then override that one specific one in whatever configuration tools being used to check it, and then everything else must obey that rule.
Okay.
Make sense?
Yeah, no, it does. And how often would you want to like check for version update? Like just when you update the program, or?
Oh, that's the cool thing about, I should have said that. NuGet that I use to install it,
Yeah.
it knows when there's changes,
Oh, okay.
and it can tell you.
You said, oh, cool, right when I was going to ask
Yeah.
that.
Sorry.
No worries. Thanks, Eric.
Yep.
You know if it's still live?
Oh, hi. Okay, good. Awesome. Thanks. We're done. Have a good day.